You've searched high and low, sought out all the leading experts, and tried everything in your power, but you just can't kick the chronic back pain that's stealing your joy and time. Does this sound familiar? Today, Coach Mitch and I are stoked to welcome a good friend and one of our very first 90-day Recode clients on for Movement Monday 15. As you'll hear, Cole struggled with debilitating back pain for years. He lost precious time with his kids, missed out on important events, and even lost confidence in his body's ability to perform. We're proud to say Cole's lower back is all patched up and ready for whatever life throws his way now. And all it took was simple, natural movement coaching based on slow motion video evidence. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Movement Monday podcast, brought to you by MovePainFree. I'm your host, Joe Comer. This is your haven for learning how your body is designed to move, taking deeper dives into slow motion film analysis, and simple exercises you can use to unlock your potential and move pain-free for a lifetime. Welcome to Movement Monday 15. I'm joined by my movement partner in crime, Mitch Van Beek, alongside a Move Pain-Free member, Cole Snyder. Cole recently completed our 90-day program and is taking the time to talk about his experience with us. Cole, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So right away, just tell us a little bit about yourself and what your movement history looks like.
Yeah, I think I got here. I used to babysit Mitch back in the day, so that's how far back the relationship goes. But Mitch just kind of reached out kind of along this journey of back when you were in New Orleans, kind of learning some stuff and going through some things. So we've kind of stayed in touch, and I had some questions and some interest in what you were doing. And so then I think about 4 or 5 months ago, we just kind of got to the point where I was struggling with, I've got some chronic low back pain stuff. And so I reached out and said, dude, let's look and see what can we do. And you kind of were working on something and wanted me to beta it with you. And so that turned into kind of going through the 90 days. And I think it's been even longer than that now that I've continued to do it. So kind of just came organically, and here we are.
Yeah. And then you said you used to play football and stuff. You play all the sports growing up?
Yep. Much like Mitch, grew up in the small town of Rock Rapids, so played all the sports, did all that. Played football at Augustana College here in Sioux Falls back in the day. So very familiar with the sports scene, very familiar with the traditional strength and conditioning and all of those things. And so I've struggled with low back pain forever. Going back to high school, and then I'm a chiropractor now, so I know why it hurts, and I've been through my conventional training there. And so I was just kind of in a pattern of I'd tweak my low back. I've got a bad disc down there. I know what it looks like. I'd go back through the rehab, get it back to where it was, but kind of just kept falling into the same pattern of and I wasn't like I was back squatting or heavy cleaning or doing anything that frankly I shouldn't have been. It was more just routine stuff that injury kind of kept reoccurring to the point where it's like, dude, I got to figure something out. So let's try a different approach. And that kind of led me to Mitch.
Yeah. How different would you say that this approach is?
I think if you look at conventional, I think if most people think, okay, if my low back hurts, I'm going to go see a physical therapist or I'm going to see a chiropractor. Most of those exercises and protocols, I go straight to like McKenzie based flexion extension stuff. And I don't want to use too many big words, but compared to what you guys are doing from how you're incorporating kind of a rotational aspect, you're incorporating more of the functional approach, it's a lot different. I mean, you look really weird when you're at the gym doing the stuff that you guys tell us to do, and no one's doing anything close to it. So yeah, you guys are off the beaten path a bit. But I can tell you from my experience, the difference in how I feel, and just even as you get further into it, when you guys talk about recoding and kind of what the kind of how the body responds, it's night and day different, especially when you compare it to just traditional strength and conditioning.
Yeah. And Joe and I have both been through our own Recode. We're still both going through it, really. And like you said, it's night and day difference when you go from that traditional strength training, mobility training, flexibility training, to actually starting to organize the body in the way that we're designed. And
I like that the term that you use, that the organization piece, the more that you've talked to me about that, and then you almost speak that into existence in a sense where you kind of start to feel that, where it's like, okay, you want your ankle organized with your knee, organized with your hip. And it's like once you put yourself in that position, you go, that really does feel like it works together a lot better than how I have been doing it. Or like when you break down any movement that traditional movement in the gym, it seems like we isolate a certain area. But when you put all that together and you're in that, those organized columns and all the things you talk about, and you feel your glutes and you feel your hamstrings and you feel your calves, and it's like that all, when that, I remember the first time you put me through it, when that came together, I was like, dude, I've done every workout under the sun over the last, 15 years, and I've never felt just the muscle activation and kind of the nervous system inputs, when you're shaking and all that stuff. And you're like, dude, this is all coming together, and it's weird. But then you also kind of start to fall in love with that. And you're like, I'm never going to go back to putting myself under a barbell, like how I was doing things.
yeah, it is a paradigm shift, a lifestyle change. And that's, I think, what is so hard for some people to buy into, right? Because you and I, Joe, we've all been bought into barbell culture before, and we've all seen really good results. Like, I remember you when you were in college, you were blown up, Cole. You were huge.
Oh, I was kind of puffy too, but I think I'm with you there. It's like the paradigm that you're shifting. It's like people want to just jump and go like, you guys are just crapping all over weightlifting and traditional stuff. And so it's like, well, now weightlifting is not good for me. It's like, that's such a jump for some people. But the reality is, it's like, weightlifting is okay if this is what your outcome is, right? If you want to get bigger, get stronger, do these things. But you guys are making the argument that if you want to move better, or you want to even get into injury prevention, which is something that nobody's been able to figure out in our space, you don't want to do these things, right? You don't want these patterns, and you don't want to reinforce those. So I'm with you on that. And I think you guys are fighting a good fight. It's an uphill climb when it's been entrenched for so long that we're all just bodybuilders and we need to lift like that and then go run on the field. And that doesn't, we're not quite there yet.
Yeah. And I think that early on, we did really just focus on the pain relief aspect, getting people on the ground, getting people on the wall, getting people decompressed, finding that correct tension in the body without any weights, without any external loading. And now what we're getting into, and you'll have to go through this stuff too, because you're bought in. We're getting into the resistance training stuff. So yeah, it is an uphill climb, but yeah, we're gonna make it. And so you're a chiropractor, you understand the body at a very fundamental level. How have you kind of, if you have at all, integrated some of our stuff with your stuff? I know you've taught me a lot about the body as well, so I just want to hear a little bit about that.
I think the piece that resonates with me the most, that kind of caught my eye when going through some of your stuff, when you guys talk about really spinal compression, and to break that down is essentially, if your spine is locked into place and it's not moving, which comes from training core stabilization, which comes from get everything tight and put a bunch of weight on your back, that type of motion. I mean, I see that all the time. So that's where I was like, you know what, there is something to that, because I can see the difference when somebody's got a free flowing spine, and the difference between a kid and an adult, and you just see what life has done up to that point. So that idea of keeping that spine mobile and energy transfer is a big deal. Incorporating it into practice is tough. I mean, it's the same thing that you guys are feeling right now of getting people to do it. Just in general, with the state of where health is in the United States, most people aren't exercising regularly. So then to try to change them into doing something that you want them to do is a challenge in and of itself. But I do see some value, obviously, in what you guys are doing. And I think the future is there to help more people with that.
Yeah. So Cole, we kind of like to break down a timeline when we work with people. So if you would just go through when you started experiencing lower back pain, and then when we started working together, kind of the timeline of when you started to feel better, short term, and then how long it took you to start feeling better for longer periods, and just kind of break down that process when you were going through these 90 days.
Yeah. My low back pain's since high school. So, I mean, that's a 10+ year deal we've been dealing with. But I think the most recent working with you guys was, I think I started working with you in like October of 2022. Um, and it was probably August and September. I was doing an incline dumbbell press at the gym, which is not using my low back at all. I'm sitting, and I remember just going up, and I just tweaked my hips, just came underneath me just a little bit, and I just felt my disc. It's the same feeling I felt forever, and I know then it comes pain down the legs. It's going to be really bad. The next 3 to 4 days are hell, and it kind of gradually gets better. So I did that, and so I just went through my normal routine of, now I got to rehab, now I got to stretch, now I got to get back to doing what I want to do. And it took me probably about 2 weeks just doing my conventional stuff to where I felt better. But it involved me laying on the floor, I mean, I was miserable and it was hard to work. Um, and so then I got out of that. And then the smallest thing, I tweaked it again. And it was like going back to square one. So that's when I reached out immediately to you, Mitch, and I was like, dude, I flared up my back again. What can you tell me? And you gave me a few just groundwork stuff to do. And I did them immediately because I couldn't move. And I remember then feeling the next day I was like 50% better, whereas it took me about a week and a half to get to that point. So that was like, okay, we're on to something. And then that just escalated to where then it was probably a week after that, I was back to normal. And since then, just going through the recode and doing it continuously, I haven't had any recurrences, nor do I feel I'm anywhere close compared to where I was. I just am moving different and feel more kind of free in that area compared to how compressed and restricted I was.
I want to take a minute and show you the side-by-side of Cole's progress over the course of these 90 days. As you can see, there is improvement in Cole's feet both in the direction that it's pointing as well as the amount of collapse that's present. Cole has eliminated a lot of that collapse towards that inside edge, and this allows for the rest of his movement to increase in efficiency. At the hip, Cole has more space for both external and internal rotation. By creating more space in the hip and the ankle can now work together better to protect the knee. Taking a look at the spine, it's much more decompressed and mobile now, allowing him to transfer and absorb energy more efficiently during movement. This has also taken pain out of his back and is allowing him to access his full potential. Now, let's get back to the discussion.
So I think one of the things too that I originally was attracted to you guys is when I saw you kind of came out and you're like, this is non-contact injuries, right? This is the pattern. Okay. And so what we see is the inside ankle collapses, right? We're on a fallen arch, all the weight's going inside there. That then locks up the knee. And then if we have an ACL, we see some rotation and that basically shears the knee joint. I mean, I'm not explaining it as well as you guys are, but basically this is the pattern on every non-contact injury, right? Let's look at every ACL. Let's look at every Achilles rupture. I mean, show us the video of the injury, but then let's break down that pattern and let's go look at where else do we see that. And where we see that is when we're back squatting, when we're Olympic lifting, it's these movement patterns in the weight room and what we're training. And so then your kind of the relationship you make there is, well, we're doing it here and we see it here and it results in injury. So perhaps we should stop training it that way. I mean, that's all you're saying. And it's hard for me to see why anybody would argue that. Okay. You know, and I see people getting locked up there and I'm like, dude, that makes sense. Cause I also went back into my experience of, I suffered an ACL injury. And I remember, as you said that, I remember what happened. I'm like, that's it. And I also remember being underneath heavy power cleans and heavy squats and going, oh my God, this feels awful. Why am I doing this? So that connection has always just resonated with me. And I think you guys are obviously onto something.
Yeah. Yeah. And you hit it on the head. All of our conventional training is promoting disorganization in the system. And I think where a lot of people get stuck with this idea of we can observe the pattern and then we can avoid the pattern. They're always saying in a non-controlled environment, we're gonna get into these positions. It's inevitable. And I might not disagree with that, but the goal is to mitigate that, right? So every time you load the pattern of injury, which we can see, it's inside ankle bone low, collapsed arch, locks up your shin on the ground. And now your hip and your ankle can't move together. Your knee is in the middle, starts to move not together. Your shin and your femur can't move together. The goal is to lower the incidence of that pattern of injury. And I think that is where people get stuck, is we can't avoid it 100%. Yeah, but you're loading it 99% of the time. Let's move that needle all the way to the other side. If you load that 1% of the time, now you are at an extremely lower risk of injury. And that, I think that's a point that people don't really understand from our content quite yet, right?
Well, I think the other thing too is so many people feel attacked by this, because if I'm a strength and conditioning expert, I've built my entire life on these principles, that now you're kind of saying, dude, those might not be right. But it's the old adage, it's like, if something was wrong, how soon would you want to know? Right? Whether it's your marriage, your business, whatever it is, it's like, dude, all we're saying is let's reconsider this, right? And that's really hard. Or you look at the average American that maybe is going to the gym and lifting weights to be healthier, and now they're like, well, what do you mean? I might be putting my, this isn't healthy. It's like, are eggs good or bad for me? What are you guys saying? I think that's where the initial struggle is, and we just have to continue to say, all we're doing is looking at this pattern and going, can we eliminate that pattern? And would you agree that if we eliminate that pattern, that athlete's going to be safer and at less risk? I think the answer is yes, but then it's pulling back all of the other stuff that goes with that.
Yeah, and I agree, it is hard, and we do our best to help them along the way. And you said this to me, actually. Let's pretend that we're right just for a second. Maybe we're not right, but let's just pretend and think about it, because we've changed how people move. Like, that has happened. So the argument that you can't change how people move is, in an observable sense, just not like we've done it. And a lot of people have done it too. And the lifting based training does it as well, but it just depends on what pattern we're promoting. So
I think one more argument to that too. It's we're talking heavily about the strength and conditioning and the athletes, but also, I mean, you just look across the board at all, and you've talked about this, all the knees and all the hip replacements that are coming, and it's to the point now where people are like, oh, I'm gonna have to get that replaced, and it's like, why is that now our expectation? Why has that changed where now everyone just assumes I need a knee and a hip replacement? Because I can tell you, I've got little old ladies every day that are getting knees and hip replacements that have never had a barbell on their back or done anything. So the argument can also be made that you guys are talking about, it's just movement in general. And now we're sitting all the time and we're doing all these things compared to, and that's why I like when you're using athletes a lot, but also go look at how the baby moves and go look at people that have never, lived in modern society, that type of stuff. The argument there is just like, dude, we move differently. Go look at your 2-year-old versus you, whether that's because you've been strength and conditioned and trained that way, or it's just life in general. There's applications across the board. We don't always have to just go take it right into sport, but it obviously makes sense in that realm.
Yeah, we live in a world of negative movement inputs, right? We have soft shoes that literally promote collapse at the foot. If your shoe is soft, your foot muscles aren't working the way that they should be. And then, like you said, modern resting, like, I'm not sitting in a chair right now, because when I sit in chairs for too long, I can feel that I'm losing some of this work that I've put in to return to my natural state. Because if you look at indigenous cultures, kids don't want to sit in chairs on their butt. Even like in elementary school, it's hard for teachers to get the kid to just sit on their butt, which maybe we shouldn't be trying to force them to, right? So yeah, all very good points. We live in a culture of just negative movement inputs across the
And
board.
then you get thrown even further into the witchcraft category because now, oh, chairs are bad and shoes are bad and they want you to do all these things. I mean, I can tell you, dude, I'm with you. I'm sitting in a normal chair right now, and that's probably the biggest thing that has slowed my progress is still all of the routine stuff I'm continuing to do.
Yep.
And I can feel like you're right. Like you sit in a chair for 2 hours and you get up and you're like, I hurt. Well, obviously that wasn't the right position to be in to begin with, but that's all good.
Yeah. So kind of want to just talk about the process that we went through. Um, and it would be great if you would speak to it. So we always, right away, we go into movement assessment. And like I said, we're going to look at that movement assessment, how the workouts were set up. If you want to just explain that in your own words, that'd be great.
Yeah. Um, I think that's obviously the proof is in the pudding when you get yourself on video, and I think that was to me like part of the assessment is well go do a squat. Well, I've done 8 million squats, so I do a squat and I send you the video, and then Joe sends me back the video with all the markups that go well. This is what I'm looking for, and look how forward your knees are going before your hips are moving backwards, and I'm like, I didn't even know that was a thing. Um, so then as you get into it and you go through the workout routines, I mean, at first I was like, it was a lot. Like I was like, I don't really want to do 25 minutes of this. Because I was still trying to train some of my other conventional stuff and I'm pressed for time, all those excuses. But as I started doing it, and I just said I'm going to do it every day because let's figure out if this works or not. Um, it started like I told you, it then became kind of my preferred workout, and I was not, I haven't put a barbell on my back or tried to clean anything since my college days were over because I'm like, I don't feel good when I do that. I have no desire to do that. But it became now I have the desire to do, I want to be on the ground, I want to be on the wall, I want to do those things because I feel better. And then I think I sent my first, the progress stuff. So then I resend the video and then it's like, oh, that actually got better. And then you can, once you see it, then you can also kind of start to understand it. And I'm like, I have so much more room in my hip joints that I never knew was possible. And now it's like the more time I spend in there, I'm like, this feels amazing. Um, and now I'm kind of at a plateau point where I think I need to make more investment in the things like we've talked about that I'm not doing to get more results. But I'm at this point where I'm like, I want to do that. So there was some buy-in for me that took place along the way. But I think once I was kind of a month to 2 months in, I was like, I'm feeling different. Then I see it on the video and I see the difference. That just reaffirms it. I'm like, this is good.
Do you kind of want to speak to the difference you might feel with the whole locking the toes, locking the cuboid bone down, climbing the heel type mechanism, as opposed to when you probably weren't thinking about that, like with any other training?
Yeah. I think my feet have been my biggest problem. And it was, I mean, I was through, I think 3 months of training with you before you guys kind of mentioned like lock your feet down, grip the earth with your toes, that type of stuff. And I'm like, dude, my toes have never done that. Like when I walk, my toes are just like limp little, I don't know, they don't move. Um, so that's still the biggest thing I'm working on. But like the difference there when you're actually gripping the ground and then how the ankle kind of responds and works, like you've talked about, it's like so it's amazing how weak our feet are. Like I got size 14 feet and I haven't used them my whole life. Like I probably would have been an Olympic athlete had I known all the muscles I had there that I wasn't using. So that's been a big one for me.
Yeah. We all have all these muscles in our feet, and our feet are set up very similar to our hands. Obviously, slightly less tactile. We can't do as much with our feet, but people neglect their feet like they're just these pieces of meat at the end of our leg. Like they just slap onto the ground and spin around, but no, they're there to grip and spiral and be the base for our movement. And I think you understand that now. And we're always developing. Like you said, it was a few months in before we were like, Cole, your
Yeah.
feet, dude. You gotta focus. And I think we have it in the videos, like in the training stuff, like lock your toes down, but it is a huge focus point that we are getting better at coaching, and obviously once we get it in the mind of the person working through it, it makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just the mechanism in itself, when you say that, it takes so much focus off trying to just be like solely outside edge. And then when you lock that cuboid bone down by gripping the ground and climbing that heel, you do it automatically. Like that's what happens is that pressure gets reverted there. So that's where the focus comes into play, where it's like, well, I know what I kind of want to look for on the film. I know what I need to strive for, but we need to cue and tension the foot in a certain way that it actually does that rather than trying to necessarily force it as much. It has to be more natural through proper tensioning. Given your profession and your experience in this kind of realm of health and fitness area, and what you've learned kind of over the last 3 months with your own experience, if you could give advice to anyone suffering from joint pain or back pain that was in your position when you would do a certain exercise or just any kind of movement and you felt your disc, you felt that pain, it took you 2 weeks, what would be some advice you would give to someone in that same position right now?
Yeah, I think most of the people that I deal with, the trouble is first and foremost, not generally how they're moving, they're just not moving, right? And this goes back into most people aren't healthy, most people are overweight, all those things, right? So let's acknowledge reality. We have to get these people moving. Now, if we get them moving better in a more quality pattern, like you guys are talking about, absolutely. But there, to me, that's the hard part. There's such a huge gap there right now to get. But I think it also serves a need because you go tell somebody that's 200 pounds overweight, you tell them to go walking or go jogging, and what happens? They hurt their knees, right? You're creating that. So I think the application of what you guys are doing benefits everyone. I mean, and there's nobody that this doesn't speak to. And it's cool too when you, as you've done more and seen more, and you see some natural movers, right? You see some of the kids you're working with right now that are studs, and it's like he's already moving that way, and you're like, that makes sense that he's been injury free and done all these cool things. But um, I think the challenge that I would give to you guys specifically, Mitch and Joe, is just how do you continue to fight the good fight with this stuff? How do you always try to keep it simple? Because it gets inherently complex. And even when you guys are talking about shit, I'm trained in this too, but internal rotation, external rotation, and this, and no one here knows what a cuboid is. It's like it's hard to make that simple. So always trying to refine it, which I think you guys are continuing to do a better job of. But the applications are there, whether you're like I said, the little old lady that's struggling with hip and knee pain, or you're an athlete. I look at it with my kids being real young. I don't have a whole ton of interest of putting them through all the strength and conditioning stuff that I went through. I think if I can teach them the movement patterns and, get them doing the right things, I mean, I don't care how athletic or how successful my kids are, but if they can go through and move however they want to in whatever sport they want and not be riddled with pain and injury and just enjoy it, that's just a huge blessing in and of itself. I think we should wish that upon all of our athletes, right? I think we get too lost and I want to get them squatting this amount of weight. Well, at what benefit?
Yeah. What is that saying? Availability is the best attribute of an athlete, right? Being able to play every game. That's what we see with Jordan and Ed Reed. Like they're not out ever. And
Right.
they're playing at a high level all the time because of how they're moving. They're not getting injured just by putting their foot in the ground. And yeah, like you were saying, the key is to get people active first. And I think, and maybe you would disagree, but the way we're going about this is a very simple way to get people active, like from a very base level. If you can get people doing the drills that the young kids are doing, they're on the ground. It's not going to be a huge step for them. They're not going to have to go jog a mile and hurt their knees, right? And then this is a good way to build that base and move on up. So
I think, like I said, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate what you've kind of discovered and chosen to invest in because it is different, and different is always, I mean, change is always viewed, it's always messy, right? You guys are like the guys that were talking about the internet before it was here. It's like, yeah, whatever. So I think I would encourage you keep doing what you're doing. And it's just how do we continue to craft the message and get it to people in a way that doesn't demonize and attack them? Like, dude, you don't know any better. I don't take offense to that, but can we consider having a conversation and looking at it a different way? Because here's what we found. And to me, that's been like, boy, no one has ever really questioned or challenged that. And it's pretty cool, the results. And just speaking from experience, I go, you're onto something. How much of something? We don't know, but let's continue it until we find out.
Yeah.
So kudos to you guys there, and just, keep doing it.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on, and thank you for going through our program. I know right away it was a tall task to ask of you and get you going. But like you said, once people buy in, the results speak for themselves. We haven't had a person say, nah, this isn't for me. So, and I plan on not having any Recode clients say, no, you know what, this isn't for me, because people get a lot of benefits from natural movement patterns. So again, thank you for coming on, and we look forward to keeping on working with you and coaching you through everything that we come up with in the future too.
You bet.
If you're ready to take control of your life like Cole did, click the link in the description for a special training offer. And don't forget to comment, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel for more information about how you can alleviate your pain and unlock your full potential.